Hi everybody. Oh my goodness, my camera is really zoomy. Welcome to today's Hitmaker funding workshop. I'm your host, Becca B, Grants Coordinator here at PRS Foundation. Good to see you all. So the format of this workshop, I'm just going to give everyone a bit of background information on the fund, the criteria, things that we're Sorry, just having some technical issues with the audio there. So as I was saying, I will run through the funding criteria with information about the fund, who it's for, and then we'll run through the application form so you know exactly how to apply. And then at the end, I will take your questions. We'll have a little Q&A. So the Hitmaker Fund was launched in 2017 as the Writer-Producer Fund originally. And we've since rebranded it as the Hitmaker Fund, and it's an opportunity for behind-the-scenes songwriters and producers to develop their careers. So this is our fund specifically for non-performing artists who work kind of behind the scenes to write and produce for other artists. So if you are a performing artist, you should look into our other funds. So we offer grant support of up to £10,000 for this scheme, and the minimum end of that is £5,000. So the Hitmaker Fund falls into our kind of next steps schemes within our funding kind of portfolio, which means it's for those at a crucial tipping point in their career. So not if you're just starting out. If you are kind of an earlier career writer-producer, you should look into our open fund. So a crucial tipping point will be different for everyone. So it's a common question we get, kind of, how do I know my crucial tipping point? This will look different for everyone, and it will kind of depend on the genre you're working in or the region you're working in. So if you're not sure, you can always email us at applications@prsfoundation.com or ask in the Q&A at the end. So for the fund eligibility, you'll need to show that you have a track record of significant cuts, co-writes and collaborations. These can't be released under your own artist name, they must be written for other people. And again, if you're kind of releasing work under your own name, you should look into our other funding schemes. You can also make your own artist-facing music kind of on the side, but Hitmaker is designed for writer-producers, like behind the scenes, and that should be the main kind of focus of the work and what you're coming in for the funding for on this application. So where a lot of applications have fallen down in the past is that you're making great behind the scenes writer-producer work, but then in the music examples, you're using kind of your own music that you have released yourself. So avoid doing that for this application. So in the eligibility, as a minimum, you'll need to have 5 works registered with PRS for music that are repeatable cuts. So for example, you've got kind of a significant amount of cuts in the overall royalty splits. They could have had kind of national radio play, or they could be from reputable writing camps. You can apply for the fund once a year, and you can get the grant once. So what can you apply for? You can apply for time to create, training skills courses, creative and professional development, studio hire, purchase of equipment, which can be up to 25% of your total ask, maternity leave and childcare, and international activity, including writing camps, meetings and sessions. So it's a little bit more open-ended than our other funding schemes. Most of our other funding schemes, you need to know exactly the work you are kind of setting out to produce, whereas this has got a little bit more creative freedom. So now I'm going to go through the application form. So this is on our FlexiGrants portal. So if you go through our website, prsfoundation.com, you can kind of read through the funding criteria there. So I'll show you kind of the journey of how to find it on the screen now. Let me just share. So this is our homepage of our website, prsfoundation.com. If you navigate through to funding for music creators, next steps, and you'll see our Hitmaker fund right here. So here is our landing page where you can learn a little more about the fund. Here is the guidance, which I always recommend reading through thoroughly before you apply, just to make sure you're definitely eligible, and you're applying for something that the fund is kind of for. So this eligibility I did just discuss with you. But this is what it looks like online. So there's a big apply here button, which will take you to our grants portal called FlexiGrants. You'd log in, and then this will take you to the application. So there are 7 sections. Don't be intimidated. Most of these are really easy to fill out, just kind of asking for basic information. And I'll go through with you kind of where to focus your time on within the application. So if we go through, the first page is just kind of checking you're definitely eligible for this fund. So for example, you are a behind the scenes songwriter, producer, not a performing artist, and things like this, just making sure you've read through the guidance, you've read through the FAQs, and it will kind of, as you kind of answer, it will let you progress on to the next questions. The next section is about you. So you just put in your contact name and information, the name that you write music under, where you're based, the request amount of your grant, your total project budget, bearing in mind that none of our grant schemes can support 100% of project costs, but we'll get more into that later. So for example, if you're coming in for £10,000, the total project budget would need to be slightly more, say for example, £11,000. Okay. So the next page is for your music. So we kind of have a little bit of information about how exactly the music should be provided here. Essentially, it just needs to be listenable links hosted online. And you are able to kind of send us a private link, just make sure that that link will be accessible and live for at least 12 weeks because of our assessment process. So at the top here, you'll provide 2 examples of commercially exploited works. And these are the 2 that at a minimum the person assessing your application is going to listen to. So make sure they're your best work. And again, they need to be songs that you've written for other artists. So you'd write in the artist name, track name, the percentage of your splits, and the links as well. You should try to include examples that are as recent as possible, preferably within the last 18 months. And then further down here, you need to include examples of your 5 works that have registered with PRS. Now you can include these top two within them. We just need 5 so that we know you have them. And then below, you will be including details of your most recent writing and production credits. And again, these ones can be included up here as well. It's just so we kind of have a sense of what your 2 best works are, 5 kind of commercially successful works, and the 3 most recent ones of those. So although there's a lot of fields, it would be kind of 5 works at the minimum within those. And then we just ask for a little background on you. How many years have you been working as a writer-producer for? Your genre, and if you have any other occupation other than music, a little bit about that. The next section, career to date, is kind of where the written portion of your application will be kind of more important and significant to our kind of funding criteria. So please make sure on this page you really think carefully about what you're going to write. So for your career to date, we need to know kind of your successes so far, particularly as a writer-producer, that if you're coming from a background where you're originally a performing artist, you can explain that and kind of your journey within this section. But please kind of stick to mostly your successes as a writer-producer, because that's what we're interested for this fund. So you can include kind of where you're at now currently, how you got there, your previous track record, your kind of main cuts you've achieved, the level of industry interest in your work. So have you had any interest from record labels, publishers, library companies, and any radio play of your music, and any kind of particularly successful artists you've worked with, you can list them here. And then we need to know who you're already working with. So this could be in terms of your team, say if you have kind of management, label, publisher, everything like that. And it should also include kind of artists you've recently been working with. And do note kind of briefly kind of their successes as well in this section. And if you're working with a manager, we'd just like to know a little bit about their track record for developing songwriters and producers and music creators as well, if that's applicable. And then there's a section for you to include any additional business activity that's not writer-producer work, if you wish to do so, and if you feel that's relevant. And then you'd just be asked the music-related income over the last 12 months and what the main revenue streams that contributed to that were. So the next section, your activity, this is kind of the bulk of what is the fund going towards? So you'll be asked to select the kind of activity that you're applying for, which is set out in our funding criteria. So as you can see, you can apply for writer camps, co-writes and collaborations, creative and professional development, skills and training courses, international activity, maternity leave and childcare, time to create, purchase of equipment, software, hardware, which, as I say, that can be up to 25% of the total ask. But if you feel it's the most significant thing, you can put that as the category. Studio hire or other. Just a question on whether there will be any international activity. And then in this section, you'll really need to kind of flesh out exactly what your plan is and what you hope to achieve from that. So we just need as much detail as you can provide in terms of what the grant will be spent on, and it can be a combination of the things above, and also why and how that's going to develop your career, what you hope to achieve, and why now is the right time. This is kind of all within this section, and there are questions below which will kind of try to draw those answers up to you. So we need to know the why as well, in why you're applying to the Hitmaker Fund. And this should always link back to your development as a songwriter producer. And also kind of why our support is needed. So for example, if you've already got a team around you, you're working with publishers, etc., you need to explain kind of what they're supporting, but why you need support from us in kind of other areas and how that's going to equate to your success and development in the long run. You'll also need to provide any details about any agreements you're with like current publishers or record labels, just keeping in mind that you won't be eligible to apply if you're signed to a major, as we'd be expecting them to cover this kind of activity rather than us as a music funder. But it's also really helpful to know, if you are any current agreements, what they are. And again, just explaining kind of if you're signed into an agreement, what they will be covering versus what we will be covering, why they can't cover what we are covering. And then there is a question on why now is the right time for you to receive funding from the Hitmaker Fund. And this links back into that crucial tipping point. So we want to support you at kind of a stage in your career where we can make this investment into your development, and it's going to have a huge impact and lead you to some great success in the future. So you'll kind of need to articulate why now versus kind of any other point in your career, and kind of always link this back to your development. You'll next need to describe your kind of goals from this project, where you see your music career in 3 to 5 years' time, and how the funding will get you there. What goals will you achieve? And in this section, you need to put at least 3 measurable outcomes. So they can kind of be future collaborations or releases, increase in streaming figures or PRS royalties. For example, you can say you want the streaming figures to be risen by a certain percent by a certain time, creative or professional development, sync placements, and or label publishing deals. So you'll need to kind of clearly write at least 3 here, and successful applicants would then have to kind of report back on that after they receive the grant in terms of how they're getting on with those goals, have they achieved any, what's gone on, who they're working with, things like that. And next you'd need to provide a supporting statement from someone you have worked with in the past, just someone who can vouch for you, who you've worked with professionally. It can't be written by you or your manager or anyone applying on your behalf, but it could be just someone you've worked with in a professional capacity for your writer-producer work, just to kind of let us know that they vouch you and maybe what they worked on with you, but it doesn't have to be too detailed, and it should just be copy and pasted in this section. So next is your budget. We kind of have a little bit of guidance in text here at the top, but essentially you would just put kind of line by line the costs of your activities. And where a lot of people fall down in this section is just by kind of including large amounts with no breakdown and no descriptions. So if you're hiring a studio, it'd be amazing if you knew the studio in particular, for example, and for how long are you hiring it, and how do those costs break down? It could be kind of per session, per week, or however it's going to divide up for you. The more detail we can receive on this, the better, because at the end of the day, we are giving you a large sum of money, so we need to kind of see how it's going to be split up. So in this section, it's really best to do your research, get quotes. If there's kind of international activity, look up flights, hotels, get it costed. And then you'll need to include your income. So here is where you're going to put the funds you've requested from Hitmaker. Say it's £10,000. As I said earlier on in the form, you would also need to have some other kind of income in here because we can't support 100% of costs. But it could be just something like some royalty income you can put towards this project, contribution from a publisher or a managing company, or any other investors can go here as well. It could be some producer fees you can put towards this activity, and anything additional you can write here. And now the expenditure in the budget and the income have to balance to zero. So you're kind of not making a direct profit or keeping any of our grant money. It's all being spent towards the project, and you're not making a loss either. So we can see it's going to be a sustainable project for you to do. You can also include in-kind income. So for example, if you have any favors and can get into a studio for free, you can kind of put in the cost that would be, and that can be an alternative source of income as well. And then the final section is just monitoring. So asking about your protected characteristics, which we would just keep for data monitoring purposes. And yeah, that's the entire form, really. So we'll open up the floor to Q&As. So if anyone has any questions, I can see a couple have already come through. I can go through and answer these. So someone has asked, can you be a performer but also write for other people? And yes, but for this fund, it's kind of designed for people whose main career path is in writing for other people as a behind the scenes writer producer. You can do that work kind of on the side, but we're interested in people who are really trying to boost their career in behind the scenes work. I hope that answers your question. Okay, we have another question. Is it okay if songs we include are not yet released? Yep, that's absolutely fine, and that's really common. So you will just be able to include a private link. Just make sure that it's definitely accessible for at least 12 weeks, so that when we assess the application, which may be quite a few weeks later than when you submit it, we'll be able to take a listen. Okay. Can we have grants from other PRS Foundation schemes and apply for Hitmaker? So our grants kind of operate on a tier basis. So we have grant schemes that are available for all career levels, and those include the Open Fund and Women Make Music. And those are kind of smaller grant pots of up to £5,000. If you've had either of those funds, you can progress onto one of our next steps funds like Hitmaker. But if you've already had one of our next steps funds, which include Hitmaker, Momentum, and the Composers Fund, you wouldn't be eligible to apply. And then, as I say, once you've had a next steps fund, you can't come back for more. So if you've already been granted Hitmaker, that's kind of it. You can progress to our international schemes. So we have something called the International Showcase Fund, and they would be able to get you over to writing camps. Okay. If you work mainly as a producer writer, can you include any income made from solo work? Yes, you can. So there is a section kind of earlier on in the application that asks for your overall income. and any kind of music related income you have that's not directly from writer producer work, that's all okay to include. As I say, just make sure that the main focus of the development side of the application is going towards your writer producer work. And a similar question, can additional income be from non-music related jobs? Which, yes, it can, if that's applicable to you. In the main activity options selection for what you're applying for, how do we answer if we're seeking funding to help with more than one area? You can just choose one area that you feel is the most crucial, is going to help aid your development the most. But then when you kind of give the detailed answer of exactly what you're coming in for, you can kind of break it down into kind of those multiple areas. Is this only for UK writer producers? Good question. So our funding schemes are available to those based in the UK. So you can be from anywhere in the world, but you just have to be living here. So another question about income within your budget section. If you've had income earned from an artist-facing project and you want to put it towards this project, that's fine. Someone has asked, they are looking for funding mostly for a studio and they don't know the exact costs, but they may look into renting the studio. So in this case, you'd really need to kind of contact them and get costing. So please avoid trying to put approximate costs. Make the phone calls, go down, visit, have conversations. They will be able to give you quotes without kind of locking you into actually spending that money. Someone has asked, very good question, how much creative freedom is allowed in the grant if awarded? And actually I'd say this grant compared to our other schemes probably offers the most creative freedom because it comes down to your development as a writer producer. So it's quite open-ended as long as you kind of set out your tangible goals. So you can kind of say, for example, you're coming in for studio hire, you can do anything you like in that studio hire. And then once you've received the grants and you've had time to create work, you would come back to us and let us know what you've done. And that's all good. So someone has asked, if funding is needed for time to create, how do we set a budget for that? It's a good question on kind of how to pay yourself fairly. And I'd recommend looking into the Musicians Union. They kind of have rates on their website. But for instance, if you're thinking you want to kind of move forward with your writer producer work so you don't have to do other like jobs on the side. For example, if you're working full-time outside of music and you wanted to go down to part-time, kind of work in, how would that work for you? And what costs do you need to cover that? Another question, if you received a Power Up grant, can you apply for Hitmaker? The answer would be yes. If you're currently in the Power Up cohort, as it's a participant program, you kind of need to wait until the end of the participant program to apply to this, just because there's a lot of activities within Power Up. So we'd kind of expect you to be getting on with those. But after that's finished, yes, you would be able to apply for Hitmaker if you're a behind the scenes writer producer. I hope you're all enjoying the Zooming, by the way. We've got new cameras in the office and I don't know what it's doing, but I hope that's fun for you. If there's any more questions, we've still got plenty of time. So someone has asked, in regards to funding for time to create, could you just list rent? No, you'd need to kind of phrase it as in you're paying yourself a salary for writer producer work and allowing yourself that time to get in the studio and create. So you could calculate it in terms of, well, how much is my rent? And therefore, how much do I need to be making from my work to be able to sustain myself and afford my rent? You can kind of calculate it from there, but you shouldn't kind of just put, this is my rent cost, if that makes sense. So someone has asked, can I discuss a bit more about what crucial tipping points might be? So with a crucial tipping point, as I say, this will look different for everyone, but essentially it will be someone who has kind of been building on their career and they're seeing their success kind of build and build. And they know if they get some kind of investment now, this is really going to boost their trajectory. And really, it can look very different for everyone. Someone's crucial tipping point working in kind of within London is going to look very different to what someone else's crucial tipping point, say regionally, is going to look like. And we appreciate there's kind of different infrastructures within different areas. So if you are kind of based somewhere a bit more rural, we appreciate that kind of seeing a breakthrough in success for you, and kind of the kind of people you're perhaps collaborating with are going to look different to those in London, for example. But again, if you're not sure, please get in touch via applications@prsfoundation.com, and I'll be happy to kind of, yeah, give you an answer based kind of more specifically on your career. So someone has asked, do successful applications typically request a large portion of the limit towards £10,000, or are you more likely to be successful requesting a smaller amount? So you can apply for any amount between £5,000 and £10,000, and it's really just about how that's going to fit in with your projects and how everything is costed. But there's no kind of preference to kind of one spend or the other. It's just about how relatively you can spend that money. You might say, if you have a lot of in-kind support already, you have a studio already that you don't need to pay for, then perhaps you wouldn't need as large a grant amount. It just depends from person to person. But just apply for what you need within that £5,000 to £10,000 range, and just make sure you do your research on the costing. And in terms of the remaining budget, can it be self-funded, or does it have to be a grant from another organisation? It can absolutely be self-funded, yeah. So it could be money that you want to put towards this that's come from previous work. It could even be, from a part-time job not related to music that you want to put towards this project. That's absolutely fine. You can also have a grant from another organisation as well. For example, Help Musicians, Arts Council, and you can put that in your income as well. That's absolutely fine. So we have a question: is it important that our main 2 songs are released, or can any songs in this section be unreleased? It's not important if your main 2 songs are released. This should just be your kind of best work. So if you have really recent collaborations and you feel like that's your best work and you have significant cuts and they're not released, you can include those. But just make sure that you include some released work somewhere within those examples overall. They don't have to be in the main 2 though. Somebody has asked, how and when is the funding awarded? And how do you receive the payments of it? How many payments are they split across? Things like that. So essentially, once you submit the application, there's a kind of 2-stage process of how we kind of ultimately award the grant. So at the first stage, we'd be getting 2 music industry experts. It would be one person who's an expert in PRS Foundation criteria. So that would be a kind of staff member. It could be me. And then one music industry expert kind of from the wider industry that's an expert in the genre you're working in. They will then score your application in terms of the quality of the music you're making and the strength of your projects, and whether they think it's going to be a great development opportunity for you. So once it's been scored at that first stage with 2 assessors, we would then have a look at all of the applications, the best scoring ones, make sure that spread is diverse in terms of representation of different genres and everything like that. And we pull together a shortlist. And in this shortlist, we would send this out to 4 to 5 music industry experts, and they'd kind of be from a breadth of areas, but they would all have an understanding of kind of behind the scenes writer-producer work. They could be, for example, previous grantees, successful writer-producers themselves. They could be working in publishing, things like that. And we would have what's called a decision panel. So we all get in a room, much like this, and we kind of go through the applications, listen to your music examples, and all have a discussion about which should receive the funding, which are going to kind of see the most success, the most deserving of the fund through that. And then it kind of goes through trustee approval, and then we're at the stage where we can make offers. So when you're offered the grant, you'd be offered 80% of the payment upfront, and then you'd be offered the final 20% once you've submitted us your evaluation. So in the evaluation, you're kind of drawing on your measurable outcomes and goals that you spoke about within your application, and just discussing where those went. So if you wanted to sign with a certain kind of publisher, how did that go? Did you manage to do that? You'd be talking about the kind of work that you made, any successes of the work that you made as a result of your Hitmaker grants, things like that. So we have a question: what percentage of the project cost can this grant cover? So in terms of our eligibility, as long as we're not covering 100%, it's fine. That's all okay. And in terms of kind of equipment costing, that can only make up 25% of the total grant. We can take a couple more questions. So if anyone has anything, fire away. We'll give you all a minute. Okay, well, I can't see any more questions come in, but our inbox is open if you do think of anything further down the line. Oh, I see actually one come in just in time there. So with the two main commercially exploited works, they need to have received radio play. We can submit an unreleased song. So essentially, the criteria is you would need to include at least 5 songs that are kind of commercially exploited with PRS. But also you have the opportunity to submit kind of your most recent work and your kind of 2 tracks that the advisors will listen to as a minimum. So if you feel like your best work isn't released, you can put those as your 2 music examples. You would then have to include 5 examples of released works. Someone has asked, can you use the funding to release a project under your own name to increase your profile? So you would need to release work on behalf of other artists. It can't be under your own name. Okay. So as I say, if you haven't had the chance to get your question answered in this Q&A, please email us at applications@prsfoundation.com. The deadline for submitting your applications is 6 p.m. on Monday. So if you have any questions, please get them to me as soon as possible. I do not work over the weekend, so I'll not be able to kind of answer anything submitted Friday evening onwards. So get your questions in. And yeah, hopefully this workshop helped you, and I really hope to be seeing some brilliant applications from you all. I'd say as well that all of our funding is highly competitive, and you know, the amount of people attending this workshop, we just simply don't have enough money to award all of you grants. However, please don't be discouraged. We will try to offer as many kind of opportunities for feedback as possible should you not be successful. And as I say, you can apply for the grant once per year. But best of luck to you all. Thank you so much for attending. And as I say, applications at prsfoundation.com. If you have any questions, I will pick them up from there. All right, thanks.